Good evening, everyone. I think that one of the most important things that modern people do not get is stability. Now, I don't mean stability in terms of law and order, peaceable society. I don't mean stability in terms of economic opportunities. In fact, I think that one of the most important things that modern people do not get is stability. Now, I don't mean stability in terms of law and order, in terms of a peaceable society. I don't mean stability in terms of economic opportunities. In fact, if anything, it's almost like those are contrary to this kind of stability. The stability that people really need, and people in the modern world do not have, is a kind of intergenerational strand, an intergenerational investment that you share with your parents and your children, but importantly with every other family you live near. A community, a society, a real society. That is something that is entirely lacking in the modern world, okay? Now, what exactly do I mean by this? One of the ways I happened upon this revelation, let's say it's not really a revelation, it's very obvious realization, I guess. But I remember when I moved into the country, I noticed something really queer about the people in the country, which really wasn't something queer about them, it was something queer about me. And that was the people who I met there, whether they're 25, 35, 45, or 85, they all knew everyone who they had gone to high school with. They still were in contact with these people, right? Now, the truth is, the people they knew in high school, they didn't even know because they were in high school. They had known them for their entire lives. They had known them since preschool, since before that. And not just that, their families had known their families. And their children will know their children. And that kind of constancy is something that was totally absent where I grew up. Now, I grew up in a suburb, and a suburb is a imitation community. It's an imitation of, a pioneer American life where everyone has a little slice of property. It's play acting, that kind of stuff. And of course, the people in a suburb, they come and they go. They're there because, your dad got a job and he's got to go to this kind of suburban area. And you know some neighborhood kids. I knew some good neighborhood kids when I was younger, but my relationship with them ended when we left. And there's no way I can keep in touch with them, I mean, theoretically, they have phone numbers or Facebooks or something like that. I don't have a Facebook. I have a phone, but it's almost contrived to keep up your relationship with these people. And this is the same thing in high school. When I was in high school, the place I was at was so big, there were so many people, that every class you would have with people who you never had a class with. And you would have 12 classes a year or so of people you've never met before. And that was just how it was. And I just thought that was how the world was. And of course, none of these people, you never know any of their family. They are just discombobulated atoms. And even if you got along really well with a person, there's a sense in which your investment in them as a person can only go so far. Okay, maybe you're going to marry your high school sweetheart and keep it going. But aside from that, there is basically no reason to establish, a year or so after I was out of high school, I had no contact with those people whatsoever. It wasn't because I totally disliked them. Some of them were my friends just because I kind of wanted friends, didn't want to look like a loser, I just like, fine, you can be my friend. But when it comes down to it, there was no deep connection between those people, and yourself and myself, right? And that there's something there where, let's say the place that I grew up compared to the country area I had moved to, In terms of economic well-being, it was much better, right? Higher standards of living, people had way nicer houses, all this kind of stuff. We have all the tools we need for society, but for some reason it just doesn't happen, right? It doesn't happen partially because you have too many options. There are too many people of who you get to know. You have too many choices of like what sub-communities you're going to be a part of. When I moved into the country, I actually specifically remember this. Sometimes, at the times when I wasn't working, and no one, there's no one to hang out with. I just had to basically like force myself to make friends. Here's someone I wouldn't normally hang out with. I guess I'll do something with them. Or I remember there was an old lady in our town. She used to have she's passed away several years ago, but she had a store. She would just sell stuff. She'd be the only person there. Sometimes she'd just be falling asleep, and I'd be like, well, I'll just go see her. Not the kind of person I would ever talk to. Where I grew up, there's no reason to, but it's almost like, oh, I might as well, here. So, and what happens there, of course, and this isn't about like having friends or something like that. It's not really my point. This is a superficial point, but it's not really what I'm getting at. The real issue is that when you need a kind of stability to have a society, and that stability to have a society partially is the people involved in it. You cannot invest in your community if your community is constantly changing. If your community, it's like people say, you can never in the same river twice. And if the place you're growing up in, or the place you're thinking about raising your children, is like a river that's constantly changing, it's constantly flowing, and you have different water and different stuff going down the river, it is not a place where a person can even invest the future. You know what I mean? And what I mean by that is, obviously, in a place that has a kind of stability, it has a kind of constancy, you can trust other people because there is intergenerational trust built up. And even if there isn't, they know that you're going to be around for a long time, right? Yeah, it's not that they're judging you, let's say, but you can be held accountable because you're not just some bug man in a city who could rip them off. You are around them for good. So this is, I think, a thing. I just got to thinking about this earlier because, I think of all the people I used to know in high school, and there's this one example in particular. There's someone, hadn't talked to them since high school. It was like a year or two afterwards, and I was walking by the high school where this guy used to live, and I just call him up, and I'm like, "What's up, dude?" I'm walking. I'm one of those Sigmas who I just walk in American suburbia. Like, I know there's no like sidewalks or anything, but I'm the kind of person, like, I so don't believe in cars. I will literally like walk from my suburban neighborhood back then to like a store like 40 minutes away, just on the side of the highway. Like, I totally will do that. Either way, I call this guy up and I'm like, hey, I haven't talked to you in a while. You want to hang out? I just went by his house. We hung out. It was really nice. And it was good catching up. And then, of course, we said, oh, yeah, man, see you later. I'll hit you up next time, blah, blah, blah. And I just remember that's the last time I ever talked to that person. Never. Never gonna talk to that person again. Haven't seen this person in, like, I don't know, 10, 15 years, something like, you know what I mean? So, it just goes to show you, like, I actually kind of went out of my way even calling that guy. It's kind of creepy, right? Calling a guy while you're walking by his neighborhood is a little weird. But at the same time, it's like, that's really what you have to do, because I wouldn't have been exposed to this person at all. It's not like we're going to run into each other at the grocery store like we would if we were in a smaller community, right? Either way, those of you who, I think there are a lot of people who, they don't want to do the moving to country route, or at least they're coping about not doing it. So, they try and play act this stuff in the suburbs, right? And as I've said, like, suburbs are just like suburbs are an imitation of like American pioneer life, like where you just have a slice of property and you just pretend you're doing something. And, I got my own lawn, right? I can have a little tiny garden. And I'm not saying like doing that stuff is bad, but, fundamentally that is not an environment that's conducive to like having intergenerational wealth and community. It's just not built for that. It's built for the opposite. So those are some things to think about. And I will say, that example of that guy, like I have so many others of, just friends where, I knew them for years. Like I knew them for years, made sacrifices I guess, like, had so many fun hijinks with all these people who, for all I know, I don't know if they're alive. You know what I mean? They're just in the ether somewhere. Never heard from them. I've never tried to talk to them. And it's not really their fault or my fault. I'm just saying, when you're not in a community, there's no reason to do that. It's like you have to seem like strident to keep up with them. If your relationship with someone depends on one of you messaging the other on Facebook or something, it's not really a relationship. It's really like, when you really know someone well, you don't have to text them all the time because you're next to them. Either way, that's just some stuff for to think about. And I think the saddest thing, it's not just about friends I had or whatever, but I think the saddest thing about kind of my memories, and even this concept of nostalgia, right? The concept of nostalgia, which is really so bittersweet. It's so painful, right? Because I think people feel the sense of nostalgia when they feel a sense of loss, that I've invested in these people. I had all these friends, I had all this stuff going on, and it's just gone. It's just like, I can't even recreate that anymore. Like I can't, and even if I go back where I grew up, it's not the same. They're totally, the Blockbuster I used to check stuff out at, it's now like a Vietnamese nail salon. It's like, there's something to that. There's something like deep esoteric, there's something severely unsettling about it. But that's the world you have to choose not to live in. You don't have to do that. You don't have to, and worse, don't think about it for your own emotional well-being. What I'm saying is, really, when you have kids and you're raising them up, you don't want to raise them in a society that is like a river that's constantly changing. You want to be able to invest in a community that they can reap the investment, and they can invest further, right? That's the real issue. Because like your kids, it is inherently traumatic in a way, not trauma like blah, 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 but I mean traumatic in a very objective sense, like just living in a place like that and not being able to have what every other human in every other society, no matter how poor or pitiful or even war-torn a society is. This lack of stability, this lack of constancy that the modern world has is just so much worse. It really is so much worse in terms of the like you can't even have a society. It's not like bombs went off and like you can rebuild your society after that. You don't have one of those things, like you just don't have it. So anyway, it's a very pessimistic video. That's it.